What I want to do is to give present a perspective of the current explosive activity that's taking place at the summit of Kilauea. And in order to do that, I want to make an explosive statement, and that is that Kilauea is an explosive volcano. Now, it's taken us a long time to realize that, but it turns out that recent research shows that for the past 2,500 years, which is about as far back as we can see, Kilauea has been in a dominantly explosive period more than half of the time. Right here at this golf clubhouse, we are resting on more than a foot of volcanic ash that was deposited between 2,200 years ago and 1,000 years ago. On top of that foot, there are several inches of ash that were erupted between about 1,500 and 1,800. Those were large eruptions, but they demonstrate, and the series of eruptions lasted a long time, but they demonstrate the explosive character of Kilauea. More recently, in May of 1924, we had a series of much smaller eruptions, so small that you can't find their deposits here or anywhere outside of the caldera. They killed a person because a person got too close. The current activity, we think, is directly analogous to what happened in 1924. Small eruptions preceded by a lava lake withdrawal out of sight, by many felt earthquakes in the summit area, and then by interaction of hot rocks probably with groundwater and perhaps with magmatic gas. We'll get into those issues later during the discussion period, but I really wanted to put this activity in perspective because this didn't come out of the blue. We've had a lot of explosions at Kilauea in the past. The reason that we hadn't realized that until recently is that for the almost 200 years that Westerners have been in Hawaii and have kept written records, there were only the 1924 explosions that took place. And so we thought that Kilauea was normally a docile volcano that erupted lava flows that can do horrendous damage, as Carolyn will describe, but that were not explosive. We now know that that is not the case, and that we're unfortunately living through a proof of that statement. Thank you.
So the summit of Kilauea volcano continues to deflate. That's caused by the withdrawal of magma to the volcano's rift zone. Associated with that process, magma left the overlook vent. It's completely withdrawn now. That has destabilized the vent and has caused a series of rockfalls. These rockfalls lead to both small and sometimes larger explosive eruptions at the summit. Some of these have put ash clouds to more than 20,000 feet. The long-term background deflationary rate has been fairly steady since a magnitude 6.9 earthquake. However, the minor explosions and some of the larger explosions we've had are associated with brief actual pressure increases in the reservoir, and that has complicated the picture a little bit. It actually relieves somewhat the stress on the faults in the caldera and has reduced the background seismicity rate. But the overall picture is that the subsidence is continuing, caused by withdrawal of magma to the volcano's rift zone.
Yes. Can you clarify for us with the idea of the water table and the lava and the fact that they can mix and create steam, those kind of steam eruptions, would those only come from up in the caldera or from Pu'o'o? Could they happen elsewhere? Could you just break that down and explain that to us in opposites?
The water table is everywhere, so it is possible to get interaction of groundwater with hot rocks or with magma anywhere where there's magma. And so we know that there have been rather powerful explosions in Lower Puna in the past. And we suspect that, this is in prehistoric time, but we suspect that these were driven by water, which, of course, you're close to sea level down there, so there is a lot of water present. Prior to 1969, it was possible to see large blocks that had been ejected from a crater on the East Rift Zone named Alai Crater. And the inference was that there had been a phreatic eruption, an eruption involving groundwater there at Alai Crater, which is pretty near where Mauna Ulu is today. So in answer to your question, I think it's possible anywhere along the rift zone, given the right circumstances, to have a groundwater-powered eruption.
And then can you also tell me then if the one that we saw at midnight, just recently, this latest eruption of ash, what caused that, and the 30,000-foot ash plume that we saw? Can you just break that down for me, Joe?
There's a lot of discussion about what caused the really high column, and we don't really know now. I think that we're anticipating that both steam from heated groundwater was involved and perhaps the involvement of pressurized gas that had come out of the magma system. But this is a topic of ongoing research.
And just to emphasize that dropping the subsidence of the caldera floor was not a rapid event associated with an earthquake. As magma is evacuated from the summit reservoir, the pressure decreases, and that causes the floor to subside at a gradual rate. Excuse me. So over the last some time since that magnitude 6.9 earthquake, that's happened at a relatively steady rate, so it's been a gradual subsidence. That now at a maximum point in the caldera has exceeded probably about 3 feet. As far as we can tell, that will probably continue as long as magma is evacuating the summit reservoir more quickly than it enters from the magma supply. I said earlier very briefly that these explosive eruptions are associated with brief pressurizations of the summit reservoir. That's an interesting process we're working to understand. Effectively, it gives us a little extra pressure in the reservoir, which has effectively slowed the rate of subsidence over the last several days. But background going forward, we expect subsidence to continue at a fairly steady clip.
Just to follow up to that, from what I understand so far, the events of this eruption follow kind of fairly closely to the 1924 eruption, where I think the floor dropped by about 10 feet and obviously saw quite an explosive event. How true is it that this is following the 1924 eruption? And if so, what have we got in store? And actually just a further question to that, more significantly, is it following at all the 1790 eruption? And if so, what are we expecting from that?
So I'll address the deformation part of that, and for the big geologic perspective, I'll turn this over to Don. The deformation we've observed in the caldera now is well short of what occurred in 1924, as you stated. So we're nowhere near as far as that goes. But I'll turn it over to Don for the big picture, especially for 1790.
I think the question of whether or not we're approaching a 1790 eruption keeps coming up, and we see absolutely no evidence for that. The situation in 1790 was that there had been almost 300 years of explosive activity. The caldera was probably, the entire caldera, or a large portion of it, was probably down to about the water table. And there was a lot more, bigger chance of involvement with a wide conduit and groundwater than there is at present. Also, in 1790, there were multiple vents on the caldera floor, some to the north of where Halemaʻumaʻu is, and one perhaps to the south of there. And we just see no evidence of any multiple vent locations today. So I think that the analogy between the 1924 event explosions and the one today is virtually perfect. I may live to regret that phrase, but I really think that everything that was observed in 1924 we have observed today. And so the analogy is really good.
Have there been any big boulders or rocks that have come out of the summit yet?
Well, yes, there have been. We have not been able to get close to the vent to know the maximum size, but I personally have seen one block that was about 60 centimeters in diameter. It actually broke on impact, and fitting it back together was about 60 centimeters, which is just short of 2 feet or so. And this was way on the outskirts of where I think the ballistics would have fallen. So I would not be surprised if the largest ballistics were several times that.